My name is Richard Cottrell. I'm leading a global commercial growth for the data solutions division here at Lighthouse. So, as Megan mentioned, I'll be kind of supporting the conversation, but also monitoring the chat. So, if you do have any questions, please drop them in here directly. Now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to my colleague Raul Mamani, who leads our business development efforts here in Lighthouse's data solutions division. So Raul actually is responsible for the Americas. So that's obviously North, South, Caribbean, etc. And focuses very much on supporting DMOs, tourism boards, CVBs, and obviously enterprise organizations across the entire tourism, travel, and hospitality ecosystem. So Raul holds actually pretty extensive experience in the industry with previous roles at some leading hotel brands such as Hilton and Hyatt, as well as global travel leaders such as Expedia Group and Amadeus. So I'll pass it over to him now, who will take you through, I think, this very insightful presentation. And again, thanks again for your participation. Over to you, Raul.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for your kind words. It's a pleasure to be here, first of all. Good afternoon. And yeah, we have about 45 minutes for this presentation and another good 10 minutes for Q&A. So let's start it. So for many of you who may be unfamiliar with Lighthouse, we are a global data company working with the travel and hospitality industry. We work with over 85,000 global customers across the complex, dynamic, and ever-changing industry. We operate to leverage our unique data as a strategic asset for our friends and partners. We do this by delivering data solutions that empower smarter decisions that drive innovation, increase your advantage or the destination's advantage versus the competitors, and optimize performance. In the case of the 100 plus tourism boards, DMOs, and CBBs that currently are supported by Lighthouse Data Solutions, our mission is clear: is to provide you with the best data solutions so you can manage and market your destinations more effectively for sustainable growth. Today, I want to talk about the story of 2025. Ideally, we will be operating in a world where demand is stable and predictable. Countries are getting along, and travelers are confident in their decisions to spend their travel budgets. But I think it's safe to say that we are not currently living in that world. As we all know, the first half of 2025 has been interesting, to put it mildly, and with a lot of change and a lot of uncertainty in the market. We wanted to look at how that uncertainty is impacting hotel prices and provide some insights on what we are seeing in the data. So we'll start with the factors driving this uncertainty. We'll look at the impact of international travel with a specific focus on Canada and then some in Mexico. I'll share a view of which markets within the US are doing better or worse, and I will provide an outlook for 2025 and the first half of 2026. And then, of course, we'll go to questions and answers. Um, when we talk about uncertainty, we are talking about the factors that cause both business and leisure travelers to change their travel behavior. As we look at the macro environment, it is important to understand that what is causing all this uncertainty is in the first half of the year, and we have several driving factors. First is the impact of tariffs and trade disputes. The impact of changing tariff is causing uncertainty, and in the commercial world, which means that at the corporate level, businesses are getting more conservative with their travel budgets. Changes to border control and immigration policies are also impacting the traveler willingness to go abroad due to concerns over personal impact and even personal safety issues. International political tensions are making some travelers less willing to visit certain countries. And as a result, traveler confidence is going down since both businesses and leisure travelers are carefully rethinking about how the global economy and politics may affect their budgets and travel plans. With that context, we wanted to ask, does it even matter to understand this? And yes, it is important for destinations to understand the impact of uncertainty and their ability to bring more visitors and drive incremental revenues, and how they can operate more effectively in the face of these challenges. So let's start with the question of the impact of international travel. As we can see here, roughly 70 million international travelers arriving to the US each year, um, which around half comes from Mexico and Canada. We also wanted to include a view on China to demonstrate that while it is a frequent topic of geopolitical discussion, the impact of China on the US travel industry isn't as large or marked as it is in other sectors. So we are not going to visit it for this presentation. International travelers do spend a lot of money in the US on hospitality and other services. These figures are from the US Department of Commerce and show that international travelers are spending roughly 250 billion per year when they travel to the US. And according to the US Travel Association, total travel spending in the US in 2024 was estimated at a whopping 1.3 trillion in total, including domestic travel spending that includes obviously lodging, recreation, food, transportation, planning, and other miscellaneous. That means that international travel makes up around 15 to 20% of total travel spending in the US, depending on how it is measured. So definitely, international travel plays an important role in keeping the hospitality industry and the US economy strong. For 2025, we're already noting that hotels are seeing some impact from decreased spend. We know that in the first quarter of 2025, overseas visitation to the US was down 3.3% year over year. And we also know that Expedia announced that the company's bookings into the US fell 7% year over year in Q1, and especially Canadian travel. Bookings to US from the Canadian visitors were down nearly 30%. This slide provides more detail on the Canadian outbound search behavior for lodging. In other words, the percentage of international hotel searches completed by Canadians and the breakdown of the destinations they were searching. The bars represent the volume of hotel search activity for each destination or country that is coming from Canadian travelers. The orange bar is the 2024 behavior, and the green bar is the 2025. Comparing year over year numbers as of April, the month where actual tariffs took effect and were first implemented, I believe it was April 2nd, we see that the US lost considerable amount of market share. And we see that countries such as France and Mexico experience solid gains. We also see that a lot of more small bumps in number of searches for other countries as well. And so this chart shows that Canadians are shifting their travel behavior to destinations other than the US. This slide provides more details on the Canadian outbound behavior for lodging. In other words, the percentage of international hotel searches completed by Canadians and the breakdown of the destination they were searching. The bars represent the volume of hotel searches activity for each destination country. I believe that is the current. Stop having some difficulties. It's not changing. So we also know that a substantial amount of the travel demand in Canada has also been opting to stay in and travel domestically. The last chart focused on Canadian international travel, but these charts include both domestic and international travel in Canada and shows how travel patterns have trended over time since January 2024. The orange bars represent the volume of hotel searches for Canadian traveling in the US. The dark green bars is the volume of Canadians who are traveling within Canada. There is always seasonality, but when we compare year over year, we start to see important drops in searches for US hotels. Relative to that, what we will expect, particularly starting in February of this year. When we look at the purple boxes, I'm having a delay here. When we look at the purple boxes, they represent the volume of expected US travel demand from Canadian base on volume from 2024, but that are opting to stay in Canada. These are the stats from the first half of the year for Mexico. When we look at Mexico, we see similar patterns as in Canada. For 2025, we are seeing downturn in travel to the US, which is the first time that is happening in 4 years. Business travel is down 19%, and the overall rate of travelers' arrivals in the US is down 7.2%. So we are not going to dive in deep for this presentation as the general trends are very similar to those in Canada. So we know that uncertainty is hurting travels to the US, but we also wanted to see how is this affecting future hotel pricing. This chart shows 245 days from May until the end of the year. What we did here was to compare hotel prices advertised in March with the same prices advertised in April. This is critical for you to understand because it's the moment where tariffs took effect and the moment where we see this trend, when this trend started. With each orange bar shows how the price for one of those 245 days changed between March and April. What we found is that on average across the whole country, not a single day showed price going up. All days show prices going down. The biggest drop was about 5.2%, and on average prices went down around 2%. And to reinforce some of the Canadian data that we showed earlier, this is a chart showing prices changes over the same time period, but for Canadian hotel prices. And what we can see here is with all the newfound domestic travel demand brought on by the Canadian desire to stay closer to home, Canadian hoteliers and destinations have been capitalizing. While US prices dropped roughly 2% between March to April, we are seeing the opposite in Canada. Prices are up. So since the beginning of the year, we are seeing a change in prices. So it is fair to beg the question, is this normal? To answer that, we look at hotel prices in the US for fall travel, September and October as an aggregate. And we analyze how prices for that time period have changed since January. So to clarify, what we are looking at, this is the average advertised price for fall travel, again, September and October aggregated by calendar year 23 to 25. And those fall prices index as of January of that year. 100% is indexed to fall prices as advertised in January. So January relative to January equal 100%. Then we lay in February, March, and April, May, etc. Represents where each month is indexed to where prices were back in January. So in 2023 and 2024, we see that summer months travel prices generally hold fairly steady during the first few months of the year, then came down a bit in the spring, summer, and never dipped below the 96% index from what was advertised in January. But when we have 2025, we see that since January of this year, fall travel prices have been falling steadily. So even though correlation doesn't mean causation, we can see that behavior for this year is very different compared to past years. And when we look at the fourth quarter, the story is even more clear. This is advertised hotel pricing for Q4 2025 as of January. Then the ups and downs represent pricing by day of the week. When we look at the same period, but as of February, we already see the drop in forward-looking prices. And then this is as of March. Now, April, we see just the prices continue to roll. And now May, June, and now we are in July. We still don't have the numbers for August, so that's why we stop here. Aggregated pricing for Q4 for the overall US is down 8.9% when comparing Q4 pricing as of July versus what it was back in January. With US pricing coming down, we are actually seeing a bit of an uptick in the search demand for US travel searching for hotels in the US, but not in the same degree as in Canada. So we know that overall US prices are going down, but we wanted to see if this is happening in the same way across all markets in the country, the US. To get a bit more granular, we look at the US market by most and least impacted by the activity we are experiencing this year. And as an example, this chart is for Washington, D.C. We are looking at the changes in daily pricing for the 245 days calendar from May through the end of the year, based on the prices as of March against prices as of April. Again, seeing how prices responded around the time when tariffs were announced and implemented. This chart is not in order by date. The days are arranged by how much prices change, so we can see the size of the changes. But it's good to know that prices went up only 5 days of those 245 days, and never by more than 1.6% on the other 245 days. Prices went down. On average, prices dropped by 5.9%. Now, obviously, this is DC, which is highly impacted mainly by reduced government travel and the need to reduce prices to keep attracting demand. When we look at the top 8 cities in the US for overseas visitor, or where overseas visits are more important, we see similar patterns of decline per 2023 data from US Department of Commerce International Trade Administration. This 245 remaining days in 2025 were analyzed for this visual, again, sticking with the March versus April methodology, to understand how the instability brought by the tariffs is affecting prices. And in looking at other major gateway cities for the US, we can see that on average, 232 days of the 245 days saw price declines between March and April, with an average decline of 3.6%. And again, these are the destination cities with the most overseas travels. When we look at the metro area destinations at the lower end of the international travel spectrum, we do see a different story. On the top 110 markets for international travelers in the US, these markets are the bottom 8. Here, we actually see that the two of the markets, Berkfield and Greenville, though very marginal. We have to admit that, but they are experienced rate appreciation. Perhaps not surprisingly, the two with rate appreciation were the two with the fewest days of negative growth. So what we see here is that overall prices are down on average in this market, but they were far less impacted by those key gateway cities. They have fewer days with negative price growth and lower average decline. So yes, prices have come down since January, but what about the long term? What about the future? We look at how demand has changed over the course of the first half of the year, and we look at how pricing has changed both in terms of the overall US and as well as in certain markets that were more and less impacted by circumstances around our macro environment. But now let's take a step back, and rather than look at how prices have changed over the first half of the year, let's just look at where things stand at this moment relative to last year and look ahead to next year. So here we have actualized pricing for 2024 by month, and we will use this as our baseline. Now, let's layer our pricing for 2025. 2025 is in green, and we see that the year started off somewhat promising, with January and February actualized pricing surpassing 2024 equivalent. Then, from March through July, we see pricing started to fall short and experience year-over-year decline. Based on where prices are at this moment, advertised prices through November are coming in less than actualized prices from 2024 in the respective months. So let's think as a revenue manager. As I want to go, further in my pricing, I usually tend to price higher, and that is not what we are seeing here. December is where things appear to start to change. Advertised pricing is currently about 1% up from 2024 actualized pricing. And looking ahead to advertised pricing in 2026, now in yellow, we are not seeing the negative impacts of uncertainty like we did in 2025. 2026 advertised pricing is currently coming out ahead of where pricing actualized in 2025 for all months through July. So obviously, these are advertised prices. So it will be interesting to see how forward-looking pricing data evolves along with the overall macroeconomic environment. But this is a positive sign for Q4 and the first half of 2026. So for our key takeaways, right? So in summary, we're seeing that uncertainty in the market is having a negative impact on international travel, which is likely to continue for the near future. However, some of the Canadian and Mexican demand is likely being absorbed in market. A good sign for hoteliers, obviously, for hoteliers in Canada and Mexico. And we are seeing that in the US, hotel prices have generally dropped, especially in big cities with lots of international visitors. The smaller cities, though, with fewer international travelers, have done a bit better. And for now, late 2025 and early 2026 pricing trends to appear positive on a year-over-year basis. So we know that uncertainty makes business challenging, and short-term prices have been affected. But while caution is wise, mid and long-term prices tends offer some optimism, and more importantly, a chance to plan strategically. And here is where Lighthouse can help. So thank you again for your time today, and thanks to TTRA for hosting our webinar. I'll be happy to take questions, and if I cannot answer them, we can always resource to Richard. And if any one of us cannot answer your questions, we'll take those questions to our the research department, and we'll get those answers for you. Thank you.